putting an end to identity politics. This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning into the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. And of course, I am your guest host for the day, Brett Siegel, otherwise known as the Disgruntled Millennial, broadcasting to you live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, and patriarchy. Today, we have a very, very special guest with us. His name is Joshua Nybo. He is a writer, a veteran, a returning student, and he's currently working on starting a web series to go along with some articles and some commentary that he writes. Joshua, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about today is Antifa. Antifa has been just sort of a thorn in our backside, and unfortunately, the left does not come out against these people like the right. We've heard universal condemnation from people on the right of these white supremacists, but on the left side, where Antifa likes to go and cause riots and hurt people and throw rocks at people, and we hear crickets from the left. Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk to you today about Antifa. What explains this growing support for such a clearly fascistic philosophy?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, you look at most of the member base, it's young people. And young people, especially in America today, are often kind of casting about, looking for meaning. They want to belong. Remember that we're living in a society where we have largely thrown away God. We've largely thrown away a lot of the ties that used to bind. Our social structure is not what it was. And so we have a lot of disaffected, disgruntled youth who they have the passion of youth. They want to feel like they're doing something. And so when they see this group, they think, oh, I'm fighting the good fight. And because Antifa considers itself effectively above the law and that it has the right to just attack people at will, it gives them the double bonus of feeling like part of a group, but also feeling like they don't actually have to rein themselves in or exercise any kind of self-control. It's saying you're doing good by just doing what feels good. You know, your first most immediate impulse. And again, since most of them are young, their first impulse is probably not going to be as thought out. So like I said, the appeal is they want to be part of a group. They want to be part of a good fight. And Antifa gives that impression, I think, to impressionable young people.
Right. And, just to add to that, a lot of this postmodern cultural relativism stuff that's going on, the white privilege, microaggressions, toxic masculinity. I mean, the whole thing about microaggressions is to basically give people a reason to perform actual aggressions. If somebody aggressed you in some way, what's your natural response going to be? You're going to want to respond with a certain type of aggression. It lends itself to an intellectual environment where these kids are basically being taught to respond to speech with actual aggressions. And I think that's one of the things that also gets these people actually up in arms and out there with their batons and their masks and their bottles. And
yeah, it's definitely very much they want to feel like they're part of the good fight, and it's exciting. Instead of doing little things every day to help people, because they live in a country where most of the quote social justice fight has effectively already been won. It's as far as like reasonable actual redress of like legitimate grievances, like say Jim Crow, for example. So but that's not as exciting. It's not as fun as being part of this masked army.
Right. And that's one of the things that Kevin Jackson also talks about a lot is that, one day there used to be a time when these things were actual institutional problems and they needed to be fought. But as soon as those problems went away, as soon as there was full equality under the law, there was a group of people had to basically figure out what they were going to do for a living, right? Like the Al Sharptons, the Jesse Jacksons of the world, the Jeremiah Wrights of the world. They had to figure out how they were going to continue to make money. And one of the things Kevin Jackson likes to talk about is race pimping, which is basically these folks who just can't leave well enough alone. They can't take yes for an answer. And of course, just like you said, these young people, they want to be involved in social justice. They want to effect change. And if they're gotten to at a young enough age, Well, then they're not given this the broader overview of history and their own place in it. So if they can be convinced that black people are still being oppressed, that women are still being oppressed, that minorities are still being oppressed, just like you said, they think they are fighting the good fight. But a lot of conservative folks have said we should punch back twice as hard. What do you think about that? Should we punch back twice as hard?
I would argue no, because I think that one of the things that will taint our movement is if we become seen, to use the analogy in my article, like if we're just another person in a two-man bar fight, people won't sympathize with us. People won't condemn them. It'll just be, oh, well, they're both equally bad, blah, blah, blah. That usual rigmarole. We're trying to fight from the moral high ground, not just because that sounds good from a pulpit in church. We're trying to fight that because that's what works. We're looking at examples like Martin Luther King. We're looking at examples like Gandhi. We're looking, going back to that church, examples like Jesus, where punching back is not always the best option on the individual level. Now, I'm not saying that if these people were invading homes, don't defend your family, or a number of other contexts. I'm saying that as far as rallies in the streets,
right,
it is always serving our interest and helping to discredit theirs. If we are leading by moral example, which is refusing to contribute to street violence and political street fighting in America, while the cameras are rolling and showing them being a part of this group, I think that's going to do a better job in the long term of helping our standing and hurting theirs, and also as far as helping. The more they hurt innocent people without cause on camera, the more that it will help reduce their appeal. The same way you see edgy kids running around with Chase shirts and with Mao shirts, blah, blah, blah. You don't see any running around with swastika shirts. Like there's even edgiest of the edgelords aren't going to push the envelope that far in school. And there's a reason. It's because Nazism is, with good reason, so tainted. And we're trying to push Antifa into that category. Whereas if we're out there mixing it up with them, it's not going to be as effective. We're going to look like we're the same thing, but with but from red states, but with an elephant logo. And that's the thing. We're trying to make the distinction between us and them. We want America to see that we condemn extremists. We don't engage in street violence. The Democrats do. The Democrats are in a sort of brown-shirted lockstep unity, except that unity is leading them over a cliff. And I would say also that for practical reasons, not just moral ones, let's ask ourselves, the Democrats have been behaving this way. How many houses of Congress do they control? I am pretty sure they also managed to lose the presidency to someone that they felt was as stupid and incompetent as Donald Trump. So what happened? And where I'm going with that is that their behavior is having consequences. It might be frustrating to see them behave this way, but it is costing them. And if we are doing the right thing, we will benefit. And we would still be better off, as painful, physically painful as what I'm suggesting is, doing this than allowing ourselves to effectively continue to escalate, to continue to cycle downward until the example I used in my article, until we become similar to Weimar Germany. And that did not end well. For the viewers who aren't quite as familiar with history, Weimar Germany was the period in between World War I and World War II, the tempestuous quasi-democracy that was around for about 12 years before Hitler took power. And those 12 years were characterized by exactly what you've seen in a very, very, very small scale in places like Charlottesville, et cetera, where you had these roaming street armies from the communists. Antifa itself was, by the way, created by the German Communist Party. It was one of those private armies. And they would go scrap against the Reichsbanner, which were the Social Democrats, and the brown shirts for the Nazis. And who's the real people who suffered in these little street brawls was the common German man and the common German property owner. And I think that if that comes to America, that is going to be a terrible thing. One, in terms of where that's going to lead our republic, and two, the death and destruction for mostly the bystanders, first and foremost.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We are going to be back here with Joshua Nybo. We are talking about Antifa. We are talking about what conservatives should do in the face of being targeted by basically this radical leftist group who basically wants nothing more than to punch a Nazi. And if they can make everyone think that everyone is a Nazi, well, then guess what? They can go and realize their fantasies of violence and just go around punching people. We'll be right back with Joshua Nybo. Get me at Shaq General on Twitter.
He won't stop until he's the top-rated radio talk show host in America.
What kind of weird competitive freak are you?
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.